Hey guys, it's Brigitte with San Diego Seed Company, and today's video is going to be about 4 things you need to consider for your fall garden planning. Now before I get into that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you're notified anytime we put out a video, and so that I can help you be the best gardener possible in zone 9 and 10. Okay, so we're in our garden, and if you have watched other videos, you will see that there's been a very big difference. We have ripped out so much stuff. Weed cloth that didn't work, we've been weeding, we've been ripping out summer crops. You can tell all my tomatoes are gone. It's been a lot of work transitioning over into cool season, and that's in part because I kind of neglected the garden a little bit. Something happened in July, kept me really busy. But we are back on track, and we're really excited to plant our fall crops, and this is a really good time to consider how you want to plan that out. Now, if you haven't done so, we have a video that Jeff had posted about his garden planner and what he does on his computer to plan out his garden, but I want to talk in the garden about some key concepts that are really important and that maybe you consider if you don't actually do a formal garden plan. These are still things that you want to consider to be really successful. Okay, so what are the 4 things we're going to talk about in this video? We're going to talk about spacing. Overcrowded plants are never very happy. I will get into that. We're going to talk about shade. Very important. Shade changes during the seasons with shadows. We're going to talk about that. Crop rotation and also companion planting. 4 very important factors that you need to consider even if you are the kind of willy-nilly gardener that just throws things in place. If you consider these 4 things, your fall garden and winter garden will be much more successful. Okay, so number 1 is spacing. I've seen it time and time again when people are new gardeners and they're really excited about planting, especially if they are buying plants from the store and not starting them from seed. They go to the store, they buy all this stuff, they fill up their cart and they bring it into the garden and they plant everything and it looks great at first, but then those plants grow and they grow into each other and there's no space and you have issues with disease, and that's caused by the lack of airflow. You have plants that are over-competing one another, so they're shading each other and they're not making prolific fruits or vegetables or leafy greens. And just in general, they're not very happy. It happens all the time in vegetable gardens and particularly in landscaping. People don't consider the end size of the plant when they're doing their spacing. So what do you need to think about when you're considering spacing in your garden? Well, with seed, it's very easy because if you flip over the backside of the packet, it's always going to give you plant spacing. Now, this is a general rule of thumb. I recommend that you test your limits a little bit here and there. If you have a smaller garden, you might be able to push things a little bit closer together, but you can't do it too close because you will have more issues with disease and less productive plants. So if you, for example, you flip over the packet and it says plant a crop 12 inches apart, you know that there's 10 packs or that there's 10 seeds in there. Well, that's going to give you roughly about 12 planting feet, and you need to space them 12 inches apart. So for Jeff, who's
10 seeds would be 10 feet.
Oh. See, I don't do math very good. You can whip out your calculator, your handy dandy phone, and you can do the math on there to figure out what that spacing would be. I do it usually with my feet. So basically, I know that my foot is huge and it's about 10 inches, we'll say a good 12. I got a foot-long foot here, people. I got a big foot. So I can measure using my feet to get an idea of what it's going to be. So if I want 3 feet, I plant a seed here. I go 3 feet and I plant another seed here, okay? On the back of a seed pack, it's also gonna say the final planting distance or spacing. That's the one that you wanna consider because a lot of crops, especially fall crops like your root crops, like carrots, which I have planted here, you plant them closer together because you're going to thin them, okay? And the final spacing is what really matters. So please, we do a lot of work to put all that information on our seed packs. Read it, it's there to help you. I promise it'll help you have a better garden. And make sure that you give your plants ample space, especially during the fall when there's more dew and moisture in the morning on the plants and there is less sunlight, so more chances for disease. So Jeff just made a really good point that most tools are usually about a foot long, but you could measure your favorite tool and then always have that as a measuring tool. With spacing, you don't have to have it down to an exact science. I'm a little more loosey-goosey than other people, type A personality, type whatever personality. You'll do it differently. but just always keep in mind that is important to the final health of the plant. You are always in the videos, you little brat. Meow, meow. Okay, so tip number 2 when you're considering your fall garden planting is shade. Okay, I'm over here in this part of the garden for a very specific reason, because this crazy bamboo has grown and shaded out this portion of my garden, and you can see very clearly right now where the shade has affected the plants and where nothing is growing, okay? Nothing is growing here because I'm not getting enough sunlight for my summer crops. So for all of your warm season crops that need a lot of sunlight, this area is not going to be conducive to happy growth. Now we're actually going to chop all this bamboo down. That's going to be a big process, but I'm going to do it because I want to open up my planting area in my garden, have more space to grow and get maximum sunlight, okay? Now the reason why I bring this up for fall and winter planting is your shade patterns change every season. It's really important to remember that, and that's because the earth moves, the sun moves, and so the trajectory of the sunlight is going to change where you get your shade. Now in this time of the year, as the sun is getting further in the southern hemisphere, it is getting lower in the sky, it is hitting more physical structures around our property, the apartment building next door, the sheds, and so we're getting more shade than we usually do during the summer. It's really important to remember that, because if a plant is completely shaded, it's not going to get enough sunlight to grow very well. Now you might be thinking, okay, I'm confused because you talk about using shade to maybe start your cool season crops, for example. So you can always utilize shade if it's really warm to grow a crop that maybe doesn't like that extra hot temperatures. So it can be a bad thing, but if you're a really good gardener, it can be a thing that you utilize to be able to grow crops in weather that's not exactly perfect for the cool season. Now, for me, I'm taking all this bamboo down because I want all of this area for cool season growing. But what I could do conceivably is leave the bamboo up, and then when it starts to get really warm in the spring, I could do extra rows of lettuce or any of my leafy greens or my brassicas here, where it's going to get shaded and protected from the harsh temperatures and the hours of sunlight by giving it a little extra shade. So utilize it if you want to try to get more out of one season, but if you are trying to plan your cool season, your fall or your winter garden, consider the long shadows and the lesser hours of sunlight as part of your garden planning. Okay, so let's use a real life example of how you would manufacture shade, create shade, or utilize shade for your advantage in your garden. I've got my little trellis here, and this is where we will do our peas in the fall. I will plant my peas, they will grow up over this, it will create shade. And now during the fall, because it's already cooler temperatures, the sun is lower in the horizon, I won't necessarily utilize that shade to grow any crops underneath my hoop here. But when I do my second succession planting in late winter, or even into early spring, and I grow the plants over this hoop, I will get shade that will protect these crops from the extra warm, hot sun of spring going into summer. You'll actually see that all the crops underneath here, these are all cool season leafy greens, and these are plants that have actually just reseeded and are growing again. I've got arugula, I've got some kale, some mustards. So these are all leafy greens that will do really well here, especially in the spring when this is covered and this is more shaded. Okay, so number 3 that you need to consider is crop rotation. Now, I'm actually not a big fan of that term in the gardening world because it kind of scares people away and make them think that maybe they can't garden because they only have 3 pots, and they're like, how am I going to rotate between 3 pots? Well, the idea is simple. Crop rotation really matters when you are growing a lot of something in the same spot year after year after year. And that's because just like a bank account, what you take out, you got to put back in, or that bank account's going to go down to zero. With your soil, if you're growing tomatoes in the same pot or the same place year after year after year, it's going to continue to take up those particular nutrients that a tomato needs and deplete the soil of that particular array of nutrients that a tomato needs. So what you can do is two things. One, you can rotate. If you have a garden as big as mine, I don't have to be as concerned about putting nutrients back into the soil because of crop rotation, because I can physically change where I'm planting. So we did tomatoes there one year. You can tell, and actually if you go back through my videos, you can see we used to have a big old tomato forest there. This year I did watermelons there. I used to have peppers further back, but the bamboo got out of control. Now it's too shaded. Now our peppers are here. Every year I change where I'm planting so that I'm not extracting the same nutrients every single season. Now let's say you can't do that. Let's say you just have 3 pots and you want to grow tomatoes and peppers and eggplants in the summer, and in the wintertime you want to grow broccoli and lettuce because that's what you eat a lot of. Every season, at the season change, when you're transitioning into a different season, you need to replenish the soil with compost, manure if you can get your hands on it, and a really good organic granular fertilizer. You're putting back in all the vitamins and nutrients that you took out during the season so that your plants can grow really well. Another thing to think about when you're planting your garden is don't plant things in the same place every single year, because you will notice subtle differences in the health and happiness of your plants when you start moving them around. You may not notice that your neighbor's ficus tree casts a little bit of extra shade during January and February until you move your plant and then you realize, oh wow, 3 rows over, it does a lot better. Change up your garden, make it fun, make it creative, keep a running list of information that you take from your garden, observations, and that's how you will have the best garden possible. Come on, get in here. Oh, Nepali says, plant for the bees. Oh, you're a famous kitty cat. Okay, so number 4, when we are considering things for our fall and our winter garden, is companion planting. A pet peeve of mine is when people make black and white statements about companion planting. Things like you can't plant your carrots next to your onions because they don't get along for whatever reason. Well, nature is much more complex than that, and in my experience and in the scientific community, we have found that it is much more likely that plants have very diverse and nuanced reasons why they may or may not grow well together. When it comes to companion planting, especially in the garden setting, I like to keep it very simple. Plant for diversity, so plant lots of flowers every part of the year, so in the cool season and the warm season, because they're going to bring lots of insects to your garden, good and bad. Look, we got a good guy right there, or a lady. Oh, bye. Ladybugs are going to come to your garden. You're going to have pollinators that come to your garden. It's also really pretty. It's nice to have a garden that is colorful and full of life all times of the year. And when you plant flowers, particularly in the fall, you're going to get really big, robust plants that are then going to go to seed. And I'll give you an example over here. This is actually an herb, but every year we let our fennel go to seed. And the reason why we do that is because ladybugs, oh, there's another one. Ladybugs and butterflies love fennel flowers, and then when it goes to seed, it will easily reseed itself, and I don't have to do much work. So when I'm talking about companion planting in my videos and in my talks and my classes, I'm typically talking about flowers. That's because I want to bring in the diversity and the color that you need for a really healthy, happy garden. Now there are examples of when you do companion planting that is for either structural needs or something like hedging, where you actually plant a plant next to another plant to either attract beneficial insects or deter them. There is lots of different information out there, and trust me, the internet is full of it. You can find all kinds of examples of people giving anecdotal references to what grows well next to each other. But to keep it simple, if you're a new gardener, plant for diversity, and I promise you that will make your garden happier than any specific formula of planting one crop next to another. All right, so that's the 4 things that I think you should really consider in your fall and your winter garden planning. Even if you don't do a formal plan, consider the things that I've mentioned so that you can have the best, most prolific fall garden this year and every year.